Down. On your knees. My shoes. You people are born for the floor anyway.
The coffee was still hot enough to steam when it hit him. Chanel didn't spill it. She poured it, slow, watching it soak through the grey uniform into the skin underneath, and then she looked at the mop in his hand like it was the most disgusting thing in the whole Buckhead Tower. Down. On your knees. My shoes. She snapped her fingers twice, the diamond on her wrist catching the light. You people are born for the floor, anyway. 40 stories of glass and Atlanta money, and not one of the suits standing by the elevator said a word. A junior analyst studied the ceiling. 2 women in Ferragamo pretended to read their phones. One girl near the front desk lifted her cell and started filming, a little smile on her mouth like she'd caught something good. Marcus knelt. He set the mop against the wall first. Careful. The way you set something down when you plan to pick it back up. Then he took the towel off his shoulder and wiped the coffee off her red heel. Calm. Almost patient. He didn't look up at her once. He looked at the shoe and he cleaned it. And when he was done, he stood back up to his full height, and something about the way he stood made her take a half step back before she caught herself. He didn't say a word. His eyes were dry and steady and cold, and for 1 second the whole marble lobby felt very quiet. If that made your chest tighten the way it should, subscribe and tell me in the comments what city and what time it is where you're listening from right now, because you are going to want to be here for the end of this one. Now, to understand how that man ended up on his knees on that marble floor, wiping coffee off a woman who didn't know his name, we have to go back exactly 3 weeks. Before the coffee, before the truth came out in that conference room and ended 3 careers in a single afternoon. Back to a corner office on the top floor, where the richest woman in Atlanta was already thinking about her son. Vivian Coleman was not a woman people ignored. When she walked into a room, people rearranged themselves. Backs got straighter. Voices dropped. Folks who had no reason to smile smiled anyway, just to have something to do with their faces. She was the chairwoman of Coleman Holdings, a company she had built with her own 2 hands out of one small property office off Cascade Road, back when nobody downtown would return her calls. Now there were towers, warehouses, a portfolio that stretched from Bankhead to Buckhead and out past the perimeter into 3 other states. People respected her because she was rich. The ones who knew her respected her because of what the money had cost. Her husband, Elijah, had died young. A heart attack on a Tuesday, no warning, gone before the ambulance made it up the driveway. Their son was 7. Half the men she did business with waited quietly for the company to fold, the way they always wait for a widow's company to fold. She cried where nobody could see her. Then she wiped her face, put on her coat, and went to the 8 a.m. meeting. And she did not miss a single one for 30 years. She built the thing higher than Elijah ever dreamed it. But the money was never the part she loved. The part she loved was Marcus. He'd been in London the last few years, then New York, learning the business from the ground up under people who had no idea whose son he was. Because that was how she'd wanted it. He was tall now, quiet, easy in his skin, in a way that reminded her so much of his father it hurt to look at him some mornings. She'd raised him on one idea repeated so many times it went into his bones. Money buys comfort, baby. It does not buy character. You will meet 100 people who forget the difference. Don't be the 101st. That morning, she sat at her desk, going over the quarter's numbers, and her assistant, Renee, stood beside her, with a folder pressed to her chest. Renee had been with her 19 years. She knew when Vivian was reading and when Vivian was somewhere else. "Ma'am," Renee said, "these are the finance reports you asked for." "Thank you." Vivian didn't look up. Marcus comes home this week. That's good news. You must be happy. I'm happy. She turned a page. I'm also thinking. Thinking about what? Vivian set the report down and took her glasses off. My son is grown. He's going to be running pieces of this company before the year is out. But before any of that, I want him settled. I want him married. A good wife would help him carry it, Renee said. A good wife. Vivian almost laughed. That's the whole problem, Renee. These days you can't tell who's good and who's just performing good. Half the women who look at Marcus are looking at the name. The other half are looking at the parking garage and the private plane. I don't want somebody who marries my son and brings a storm into the house. I want somebody with a real heart. Somebody who'll stand next to him when it's ugly, not just when it's easy. Renee was quiet a moment. Are you already looking at somebody? I've been watching 3 young women in this building for months. 3, Imani, Chanel, Tasha. Renee nodded slowly, letting each name settle. Imani Robinson worked down in accounts, quiet. First one in most mornings, greeted the security guard by name, did her work, kept out of the gossip that ran through that office like a current. The kind of person who is easy to overlook precisely because she never asks you to look. Chanel Harris worked in marketing. Beautiful, sharp, loud in the way confident people are loud. She knew how to dress, how to talk to a client, how to walk into a room and make it turn toward her. Tasha Jefferson was in administration. Soft-spoken, always gentle, always respectful, especially, Vivian had noticed, when someone senior was in earshot. Vivian had watched all 3 for the better part of a year. She also knew that what people show you in the open is not always what they are. I'm not going to force him, she said. It's his life. He picks. But I want to put things in front of him. Let me hear how they answer when I raise it. Call Imani first. Imani came up not knowing why. She sat down across the wide glass desk with her hands folded, not too loose, not stiff, just still, and she waited. I called you, Vivian said, because I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it plain. My son is coming home this week. He's old enough to marry, and I've been thinking about the kind of woman who might give him peace. I'm not telling you to marry him. I'm not telling him to marry you. But I've watched how you work, and I've watched how you treat people who can do nothing for you, and I'd like you to meet him. Imani was quiet for a second. Ma'am, I'm grateful. That means more than I can say. Then, carefully. But I don't want to start building a whole life in my head around a man I've never met. He's got his own heart. He might come home and choose somebody else entirely. I'd rather just meet him and see what's real. Vivian looked at her a long moment. That was the answer she'd been hoping for and hadn't expected. No jumping. No pretending to be humble. Just true. That's a wise answer, she said. Don't tell anybody about this conversation. I won't, ma'am. And Imani. She caught her at the door. Don't ever let this building change that heart of yours. I'll try, ma'am. When the door closed, Vivian sat still and smiled to herself. Then she called for Chanel. Chanel came in smiling before she'd even cleared the doorway. When Vivian laid it out, the same words almost exactly, the excitement came up in Chanel's face so fast she couldn't hold it down. Your son. Me. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. You won't regret even thinking of me. She said it 3 different ways. By the time she left, she was walking like the floor already belonged to her. And by the time she got back to her desk, she couldn't read a single line of the report open in front of her. Because she was already in the back of a car with a driver, already stepping onto a plane, already hearing people say, "Welcome, ma'am. This way, ma'am." Vivian watched the door close behind her and thought, too fast. She saw it too fast. Then she called Tasha. Tasha sat with her hands folded neat in her lap and her voice low and even. That's good news. Ma'am, congratulations. You've waited so long. God kept him for you. Every word was correct. Every word was placed. She was grateful, she said, and she would be herself, and she would tell no one. And she thanked Vivian twice on the way out. But she didn't run, and she didn't dance. She went back to her desk and opened her laptop and sat there not working, thinking, already turning the problem over. How do I get in front of him? How do I get in front of him before anybody else does? 3 women, one who wouldn't dream too far, one who was already spending money that wasn't hers, and one who was already planning. 2 days later, the plane touched down. Vivian didn't send a driver. She went herself. When Marcus came down the steps, she opened her arms and held on to him a few seconds longer than she needed to, just to be sure he was really there. You've changed, she said in the car, looking at him. Changed how? You look like your father. Elijah's absence sat between them the way it always did, soft some days and heavy others. This was a heavy one. That evening, after he'd rested and eaten, she sat with him in the front room and told him everything. The company, the handover, and then carefully, the marriage. Ma, I just got home. Let me breathe. You can breathe and listen at the same time. He smiled. You've already got names, don't you? 3, Imani in accounts, Chanel in marketing, Tasha in administration. 3. He leaned back. Am I choosing a wife or conducting interviews? Don't be smart. I only want you to meet them. That's all. He was quiet, turning his glass in his hand. Then he said the thing that changed everything. Ma, if they meet me as your son, they'll show me exactly what they think I want to see. Every one of them. I won't learn a thing. He set the glass down. I don't want to walk in as the heir. I want to walk in as somebody nobody has any reason to respect. I want to come in as a janitor. Vivian looked at her son for a long time. A janitor? You want to carry a mop through my company? I want to see how they treat a man they think is nobody. If they can respect me with a bucket in my hand, then I'll know it's real. If they insult me, I'll know that too. I don't want to marry a pretty face, Ma. I don't want to marry a soft voice. I don't want to marry somebody who loves this company. I want to marry somebody who can see me when I look like I'm worth nothing. The plan sounded strange, but she'd raised him on one idea, and here it was, grown up and looking back at her out of his father's face. She knew he was right. It's a risky yes, she said finally. Is that a yes? Only 2 other people will know. You, me, and Terence. Who's Terence? Terence Freeman, my operations manager. 7 years. Serious, quiet, loyal as they come. Nobody moves in this building without him knowing. He'll set it up. Terence came up 20 minutes later, heard the whole thing, and did not blink more than twice. Ma'am, the staff are expecting your son to start soon. If anyone recognizes him. They won't, Marcus said. Most of them have never seen my face, and I won't be dressed like this. What name do we use? Mine. Marcus is common enough. Nobody's going to hear a janitor named Marcus and think about the chairwoman's son. Terence nodded slowly. There's a cleaning supervisor, Mr. Okonkwo. Good, man, been here forever. He doesn't need to know either. I'll tell him you're a temp sent up from the agency. Start you on the top floors. Then I start tomorrow, Marcus said. Watch everything, Vivian told Terence. Don't step in unless somebody's about to get hurt. Yes, ma'am. That was the last easy night in that house for a while. He came in before the sun the next morning, before most of the building was awake. The uniform was a faded charcoal gray, a size too big in the shoulders, worn soft at the cuffs but clean, because Terence had thought of that detail without being asked. A plain cap over his hair. A mop, a bucket, a spray bottle, a stack of blue towels. Anybody who'd seen him step off that plane 2 days earlier would not have believed this was the same man. Terence met him at the service entrance and looked him over. "You ready? Do I look poor enough?" "You look like you belong here," Terence said, and neither of them smiled, because it wasn't quite a joke. Mr. Okonkwo came in a few minutes later, a short older man with tired, kind eyes who took his work seriously and expected everyone under him to do the same. "You've cleaned before?" "A little," Marcus told him. "This is serious work," Okonkwo said. "The floors shine, or they don't. There's no in-between. They spill, you wipe. They talk to you sideways. You don't answer. You do your job, and you keep moving. Start at the main reception. I want that floor done before the executives come up." Marcus filled the bucket, worked the detergent in, and started to mop. For a while, the lobby was empty and quiet, and the marble came up clean under the light. Then the workday arrived. People came through the glass doors in twos and threes, and most of them walked past him, like he was part of the furniture. Some stepped around the wet floor without seeing him at all. One man finished a paper cup of water and dropped it on the floor. Marcus had just cleaned and kept walking, still talking into his phone. Marcus looked at the cup a second. Then he picked it up and threw it away. Nobody in that lobby knew he was anybody. He was a man with a mop. That was the whole point. Then Imani came through the doors. She stopped the moment she saw the wet floor, food container in one hand, bag on her shoulder. "Good morning," Marcus said. "Sorry about the floor. Give it a minute to dry so I don't ruin your morning." "You can go on," he added. "I'll do that side again." "No, don't worry about it." She smiled a little. "You already cleaned it once. I can wait." When it dried enough, she stepped through, careful, and said, "Thank you." "I should be thanking you," Marcus said. "For what?" "For waiting. Most people just walk through it." She shrugged like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Work is work. Somebody cleaned it. Least I can do is not mess it up." And she went on to the elevators. So that's Imani, he thought, and something in him filed it away. A different sound came across the lobby a little later. Heels sharp on the marble, fast and hard, the sound of a person who wants the room to hear her coming. Chanel. Fine dress, designer bag, walking like reception was a runway that had been waiting for her all morning. "Careful, ma'am," Marcus said. "Floor's still wet on that side." She stopped and looked at him like he'd said something filthy. "Excuse you. You think I can't see? I only said it's wet. And you picked right now to mop when people are coming in." Her voice climbed. "Are you slow? This is when important people walk through, and you're down here dragging a mop around like the world's waiting on you. Clean it again. That's your whole job." His hand tightened on the mop handle. He remembered his mother's face across the desk. "Don't react. Watch." So he rinsed the mop and cleaned the floor again, and while he did it, his head was perfectly clear. 5 minutes. She hadn't known him 5 minutes, and she'd already told him everything. He watched her heels disappear down the corridor and went back to work. The days that came after were all the same shape. He cleaned the conference rooms after the meetings emptied out, wiped the long tables, stacked the chairs, carried out the bottles and the torn paper and the cold coffee. He did the glass doors every morning until they disappeared. He hauled the bucket from one end of that building to the other and back. Some people thanked him. Most didn't. And because they were sure he was nobody, they talked in front of him like he was furniture, which meant Marcus learned more about Coleman Holdings in 3 weeks with a mop than he'd have learned in a year with a corner office. He learned the building in a way no executive ever would. He learned that the 5th floor bathroom ran cold until almost noon, and nobody upstairs had ever heard a complaint about it, because the people who complained didn't have anybody's ear. He learned which managers said good morning to the guard at the desk, and which ones walked past him every day, for years like the man was a plant. He learned that Mama Joy, who'd cleaned that building for 11 years, had a grandson in a wheelchair and worked doubles on Fridays to cover the copays, and that not one person on the executive floor knew her last name. He learned the whole hidden country that runs underneath a company, the one the annual report never mentions. And he learned it the only way you can, which is from the bottom, with a bucket, being invisible. Some of it made him proud of the place his mother had built. Most of it made him quiet. One afternoon he was emptying a bin near marketing when 2 women stood by the printer and talked over his head. "Chanel thinks she already runs this place," one said. "Since the chairwoman called her in, she's a whole different person," the other said. "If the sun takes over and changes everything, some of us are gonna miss the good old days. You better watch your mouth. You never know who's listening." Marcus almost smiled into the trash bin. If only you knew. But through all of it, one thing stayed the same. Every single morning, Imani said good morning to him, in the hallway, by the stairs, at the bank of bins near the freight elevator, even when there was nobody else around to see her do it. She didn't perform it. It was just what she did. One afternoon, after a long management meeting, he was cleaning the big conference room alone. He was tired, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes, and he didn't hear her come in. "Marcus." She was in the doorway with a stack of files. "You look worn out. It's part of the job. Have you eaten anything?" "I'll eat later." "What time is later?" He didn't answer. She looked at him a second, then turned and left, and he thought she'd gone. A few minutes later she was back, holding a bottle of cold water and a snack from the vending machine on the 4th floor. "Take this. You've been at it since morning." "Ma'am, you don't have to. You're not troubling me. Take it before the water gets warm. You'll do so much, and nobody sees half of it." She set it in his hand. Some people think a person with a mop isn't worth their time. That's their problem. Work is work. You're doing yours, I'm doing mine. Nobody in this building is better than anybody. Nobody is better than anybody. He'd heard a lot of sweet words in his life, from people who wanted things. Hers didn't sound like those, because she wasn't trying to get anything, and she had no idea there was anything to get. He stood there holding that water like it was worth more than the whole floor he was standing on. "Eat before you keep going," she said, and went back to work. That was the day he started watching her differently. Chanel, meanwhile, had become a different person entirely. Since the chairwoman called her in, the dresses got louder and the heels got higher, and the perfume announced her from around the corner. She sat with her work friend Nakia. On break one morning, leaning in like she was sharing state secrets. "Very soon, people are gonna know my real level in this company," she said. "You still on about what the chairwoman told you? She didn't call me in for nothing. Her son's coming home, and when he sees me, what else is he gonna be looking for? Some people better start respecting me now, before it's too late." Later that day, she saw Marcus wiping a table near her department and called across the floor. "Janitor, come wipe my table." "I wiped it this morning, ma'am." "Did I ask you when you wiped it?" "I said, do it again." He came over, bent to the table with his towel, and while he was down there, she picked up a carton of juice off her desk, opened it, and tipped it out onto the floor beside her chair. "Oops," she said, and smiled. "Look what you let happen. Clean that up. And look at you, all that face, and you're still just cleaning up after people like us. Some folks are born to sit in offices. Some are born to carry a bucket. Try not to leave it sticky." He wasn't angry. He was learning. He cleaned it up and moved on. And Chanel thought she'd won something. Tasha worked differently. Tasha never raised her voice. She smiled soft. She spoke gentle. And she was busy in her own quiet way. She started bringing little gifts to Renee, the chairwoman's assistant. Saw this and thought of you, Auntie Renee. Just a little something. And by the way, is the chairwoman stressed these days, with her son coming home? Do you happen to know the kind of woman he likes? Renee gave her nothing, and Tasha, sensing the door was closed, moved on. She started being friendly with Imani instead, complimenting her dress, her calm, her perfect work, and watching, always watching, to see where Imani stood. And once, after Chanel had insulted Marcus in a hallway, in front of 2 senior staff, it was Tasha who stepped forward with her soft voice, while the seniors were still in earshot. She shouldn't speak to workers like that. Everyone deserves respect. The seniors nodded, impressed. But an hour later, when the hallway was empty, and it was just the 2 of them by the cleaning closet, Tasha found Marcus. "Don't misunderstand what happened earlier," she said. "I only spoke because Chanel was making a scene, embarrassing everybody. Don't go thinking I did it because we're equal or anything like that. I don't like when people get the wrong idea." Marcus said, "I understand, ma'am." And he did, completely. Now he was sure. Chanel's cruelty was loud and lived out in the open. Tasha's kindness was for the eyes of the room, and it turned off the second the room emptied. Of the 2, he'd already decided the quiet one was the more dangerous. That night, he came home tired, and his mother took one look at him and said, "My janitor son is back. Ma, today was something," he told her. Chanel and the juice, the shouting. And Imani, who'd told Chanel that honest work didn't make him less than anybody. Vivian listened to all of it with her hands folded. "That girl has a good heart," she said. "She does. And she has no idea who I am. That's the part that gets me. And Tasha. Tasha's careful. She's got one face for the room and another for the closet. Chanel wears her pride out loud. Tasha hides hers behind a soft voice. And Ma, I'll tell you the truth, that scares me more." Vivian looked at her son. "And Imani?" He didn't answer right away, and that was answer enough. "Don't rush your heart," she said. "The test isn't over." "I know, Ma." But it had already started, whether he rushed it or not. The next weeks, the building settled into its 2 rhythms, the one everybody saw, and the one only Marcus was watching. Chanel chased position out loud. She started bringing coffee up to Terence Freeman's office, complimenting his tie, laughing too hard at a small joke he made in a department meeting. Nakia pulled her aside at lunch. "People are watching, girl." Chanel waved it off. "Let them. If the chairwoman's son wants to take his time, I can manage Terence for now. He looks rich. He looks important, and I am too beautiful to suffer." Marcus heard that last line through the glass while he was cleaning the door to Terence's office, and he shook his head and kept wiping. She wasn't looking for love. She was looking for a landing spot. Tasha chased information, but with more sense. She didn't bring coffee every day. She came with files and questions. "Sir, I need advice on this report." And then, softer, staying a beat too long. "Sir, has the chairwoman's son come back quietly? You know how she likes to do things without telling people." Terence told her to focus on her work. That evening he told Vivian, "Ma'am, Tasha's asking questions about your son. Not work questions. She wants to know if he's already here." Vivian nodded slowly. He was right about her, and Marcus kept watching Imani, who wasn't performing anything for anyone. He watched her help an older cleaner, Mama Joy, lift a heavy bag of waste near the freight elevator, an office woman with no reason to touch it, hauling it because it was too heavy for one person. He watched her tell a staffer who'd thrown a balled-up paper at 2 interns to pick it up himself, because they were people, not trash cans. Every time, she did it the same, whether anyone was watching or not. That was the thing that got into him. It wasn't a show she put on. It was just the shape of her. One evening, she stayed late to finish some documents, and most of the floor had gone home. Marcus was arranging chairs, picking small papers off the carpet. She carried a stack of files past him, and half of them slid out of her arms and fanned across the floor. He was down on his knees gathering them before she'd finished, saying, "Oh no." They ended up crouched on the same carpet, reaching for the same folder, and both of them stopped for half a second. "Sorry," she said. "It's fine." He handed her the stack. "You work late a lot. Sometimes I like to finish what I started." She looked at him. "You do too. You're always here." When a man's trying to get somewhere better, he can't be ashamed of the work in front of him. So cleaning's not where you want to stop. No, it's just where I am right now. "Don't be ashamed of it," she said. "Some people wear a suit every day and still have dirty hands. A job doesn't tell you what a person's worth. Their heart does." They stood there a moment in the quiet building, and from that night, without either of them naming it, they were friends. Small things. "Did you eat today? Let me take half of that." She'd leave a bottle of water and a snack by the cleaning closet when she left. He started writing little notes on scraps of paper and slipping them into her files when nobody was near. One said, "Don't let this building steal your peace." She smiled about it the whole next day and didn't tell a soul. It took him a couple more weeks to work up the nerve. Evening again, most of the staff gone. "Imani, can I talk to you a second?" "Okay. I don't know how to say this, so I'll just say it. I like you. Deeply. I know I'm just the man with the mop. I don't have much. But what I feel is real, and if you don't feel the same, I'll understand and I'll never bring it up again." She looked at him for a long moment. "I like you too," she said. "You do, from the first day. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not going to be ashamed of a man who works hard and treats people right. I like your calm. I like that you don't talk too much. I like the way you respect people who don't respect you back. You have no idea what that means to me." "We should keep this quiet," he said. "I agree. I don't want this office turning us into their entertainment. No gossip. No gossip." So it stayed small, a note in a file, a snack by the closet, a smile in the hallway that lasted a beat longer than it should. They talked, some evenings, when the building emptied out and it was just the two of them and the hum of the machines. She told him about her father, how he'd died when she was 9, how her mother had worked 2 jobs and never once let Imani see her cry, and how the one thing her mother drilled into her was that you treat the dishwasher the same as the doctor, because on the inside they're the same size. She told him she'd taken the accounts job because it was steady, and she was still paying off the schooling that got her into it, and that she didn't dream too big anymore, because dreaming too big had a way of costing her. He listened more than he talked, which she noticed, because most men she'd known did it the other way around. And when she asked him about his own people, he told her the truth sideways, that his father was gone, that his mother was strong, in a way that could be hard to live next to, that he'd been away a long time learning things, and was still figuring out what he wanted to do with what he'd learned. All of it true, none of it complete. He hated that part. He told himself it wouldn't be for much longer. It was quiet, and it was real, and quiet things don't stay hidden forever. Chanel noticed first, because Chanel noticed anything that might be a threat and most things that weren't. She saw the way Imani's face changed when Marcus went by. "So, Imani's lowered herself to a janitor," she said to Nakia, disgusted. Well, at least that takes her out of the running, but it still needled her that a woman she'd decided was beneath her could look that content. Tasha noticed too, and her suspicion ran a different direction. She'd started watching Marcus more carefully. The way he spoke didn't always sound like a man who mopped floors for a living. He was too calm. He carried himself too easily. And once, she caught the way Vivian's eyes moved to him in a hallway. Just for a second. And something didn't line up. One evening she stood by her office door and watched Marcus and Imani trade a small, private smile across the floor. And she thought, there's something about that janitor. She didn't run to tell anybody, the way Chanel would have. She made a plan instead. She'd get closer to the janitor, but not too close in case she was wrong, because she still needed her hands free to reach for the chairwoman's son. One hand near the janitor, one eye on the heir. That was Tasha. The morning she almost figured it out. She came in early, and so had Marcus. He'd written a note for Imani. Don't let anybody make you feel small. You've got a heart most people in this building couldn't buy. And he folded it and stepped into the accounts office to leave it on her desk, thinking no one was there. Tasha was there, in the shadow by the filing cabinets, watching. She didn't see what the note said. She saw a janitor who moved through the executive floor like he had a right to it, leaving something on the desk of the one woman the chairwoman had her eye on, and she filed it away. Then Chanel forced the issue in the open. She cornered Imani in the hallway. I know your little secret. What secret? Don't play innocent. You're seeing that janitor. Aren't you ashamed? The chairwoman called you in about her son, and you go running to a man with a mop. Why would I be ashamed? Imani said. There's no rule in this building against who I can care about. He's poor and he's useless. A man isn't useless because he's poor. A person's useless when they've got no heart. He works honest, and he treats people right, which is more than I can say for you. Money puts food on the table. A good heart doesn't buy a phone or a plane ticket. I don't need those things the way you need them. I know that my chest goes tight when I'm near him, and I know he gives me peace, and I'll take peace over a plane ticket any day of the week. You're going to regret this, Chanel said. Maybe. But it'll be my regret. My choice. Chanel turned and walked off hard, and Marcus, wiping the glass railing 20 feet down the hall, heard every word of it. He lowered his head and smiled to himself. She hadn't fought. She hadn't insulted anybody. She'd just told the plain truth and let it stand. That was the day his quiet interest turned into something he couldn't talk himself out of. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, drop one word in the comments. Scene. Because you're about to watch a woman throw away the exact thing 3 other people were fighting over. Now, let's keep going. The trouble that changed everything started with a cup of tea and a hallway. It was a hot Atlanta afternoon, the kind where the AC in the building works overtime and never quite wins, 95 degrees on the sidewalk, and everybody short-tempered by 2 o'clock. Chanel was coming out of the 4th-floor kitchen with a cup of tea, moving the way she moved, fitted dress, heels, chin up. A young staffer named Uch came out of the records room at the same moment with an armload of files. He was new. He didn't see her. They collided, and the tea went everywhere, some on Chanel's hand, most of it across the floor. Are you out of your mind? She snapped. I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't see you. You didn't see me? Are your eyes decoration? Her voice cracked across the whole floor. Janitor, get over here and clean this mess, now. Marcus came with his towel and his bucket. He crouched to the spill. Can you shift a little, ma'am, so I can get under the chair? No. Clean around me. She didn't move a heel. People like you get paid for this. That's what you're for. He worked around her shoes. Uch stood there apologizing to the heir, and Chanel talked over him about how some people are just useless. And the whole hallway watched a grown man on his knees clean the floor around a woman who wouldn't move her feet. Imani came around the corner from accounts and stopped cold. Chanel, there's no need for that. No need for what? To humiliate him. And that boy said he was sorry, it was an accident. Oh, so now you're defending the janitor. Chanel laughed, ugly. Of course you are. That's your level now, isn't it? He's a person before he's a janitor. Imani's voice was steady, not loud. He's doing honest work. That doesn't put him under you. Y'all should sell tickets to this, Chanel said, and clicked away down the hall. Marcus finished the floor. Uche came close and said, "Quiet." "Thank you," Marcus said. "It's all right." And when the hallway emptied and it was just the workers, Marcus straightened up and looked down the hall where she'd gone and filed it. Later, when two senior managers were standing near the corner, Tasha stepped forward with her soft voice, loud enough to carry. Chanel really shouldn't speak to staff that way. Nobody should be insulted for the work they do. The managers nodded. Good, decent Tasha. And when they'd gone, she caught Marcus by the closet and said the quiet part, the way she always did. Don't read too much into that. I only said something because Chanel was making everybody uncomfortable. It wasn't about you. Marcus said he understood, ma'am. He understood everything. That night he told his mother about the tea, and Uche, and the floor, and Imani stepping in without a second's hesitation, while Tasha performed it for the managers, and took it back the moment they left. Vivian listened. Chanel wears her whole self on the outside, she said finally. Tasha keeps hers folded up where the light can't reach it. Open pride is bad, son. Fake humility is worse. A proud person at least shows you who they are. The other kind smiles in your face and you don't know what you've got until it's too late. I know, Ma, and you've decided about Imani. He didn't answer, and she let it go. What Marcus didn't know, sitting in his mother's front room, was that Chanel had decided to end it. She'd had enough of watching Imani walk around content. Enough of the janitor. She told Nakia to follow them after work and find out exactly what was going on. And Nakia, who didn't like the idea, but liked crossing Chanel even less, waited by the side entrance that evening, pretending to scroll her phone. When the floor cleared out, Imani came down and Marcus was waiting near the back of the building with his bucket beside him. Nakia watched from behind a pillar. She saw Imani walk up to him, saw the soft smile, saw him say something and Imani laugh, saw the two of them stand close in the loading dock light. She saw Imani reach out and take his hand, and before she left, she saw Imani hug him. Nakia went straight back up. Chanel was pacing the hallway. Well, what did you see? They were holding hands, and she hugged him before she left. She hugged the janitor. Chanel's face went tight and satisfied at the same time. With my own eyes, you saw it. She hugged that janitor. After all that quiet, holy act, she's out there hugging the help. She was already reaching for her phone. Let's see what the chairwoman thinks when she hears the woman she's considering for her son is out back hugging the cleaning crew. Chanel, be careful. Careful for what? Imani's the one who should be careful. But the next morning, before Chanel could do a thing with it, Imani did something none of them saw coming. Chanel found her in the hallway and blocked her path. I'm going to the chairwoman right now. Let's see if she still wants you when she hears what you've been doing. You don't have to do that, Imani said. Watch me. No. Imani took out her own phone. I'll call her myself. Chanel stared. You're bluffing. Imani dialed, put it to her ear, waited. Good afternoon, ma'am. It's Imani. I'm sorry to call in the middle of the day, but I need to tell you something, and I'd rather you hear it from me than from anyone else. A pause. Ma'am, I'm not able to meet your son for marriage. I've found someone I love. Another pause. His name is Marcus. He works here as a janitor. I know how that sounds. But I couldn't let you go on considering me while my heart's already somewhere else. It wouldn't be honest. Chanel's mouth had come open. Thank you, ma'am, Imani said quietly. I'll come Saturday. Yes, thank you. and she hung up. On the other end, in her corner office, Vivian Coleman set the phone down slowly and sat very still. She had asked this woman for nothing but honesty, and this woman had just talked herself out of a fortune on a company phone line in the middle of a workday for a man she thought scrubbed floors for minimum wage. Vivian pressed her hand flat against the desk and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Down in the hallway, Chanel found her voice. "You've finished yourself. You know that? You just handed it to me." "It's not a competition to me," Imani said. "It never was." And she walked off, her heart going hard in her chest, not because she was afraid of losing anything, but because she didn't know if she'd just made the chairwoman proud or ashamed. And she'd told the truth anyway. Marcus had been at the end of the hall the whole time, a towel in his hand, forgotten. He heard all of it, his name in her mouth. Janitor. "I've found someone I love." He turned and walked into the empty stairwell and stood there for a minute with his back against the cold cinder block. And for the first time since he'd put on that grey uniform, the man who could buy the whole building had to work to keep his composure. She'd thrown away everything she thought he wasn't, for the little she thought he was. He'd built this whole test to protect himself. That was the truth he stood there with, back against the cinder block. He'd put on the uniform because he'd stopped believing anyone could want the man instead of the money, and some part of him had expected to be proven right, had almost wanted to be, because being right about that is easier than hoping. And here was a woman who'd just gone and blown the whole thing apart on a phone line in a hallway, not for a version of him she'd been shown, but for the one she'd guessed at in the dark, the poor one, the one with nothing. She hadn't passed his test. She'd made his test look small. He'd been trying to catch people at their worst, and she'd caught him at his least generous, and she didn't even know she'd done it. He'd have to tell her soon. He knew that. He also knew that the moment he did, something clean would end. This thing where she loved him for absolutely no reason a sensible person would list, and he wanted to stand in it one more day, before the money got into the room and started rearranging everything the way it always did. There was one more piece the schemers didn't know about, and it had been sitting in the building the whole time, quiet as the mop in Marcus's hand. On his second day, Terence had walked him through the floor plan the way you'd walk any new hire through it, and pointed out, in passing, the little black domes in the ceiling corners. "Security covers every hallway, every lobby, every common area," Terence had said. 90 days of footage on the server. It had sounded like nothing. A line in an orientation. Every insult Chanel had thrown. Every time she'd made him clean around her heels. The juice on the floor. The tea in the hallway. The words some folks are born to carry a bucket. All of it from a dozen angles, sitting on a server 3 floors down waiting. And Tasha, who'd been asking Terence her careful questions for weeks, was on that server too, in a different way, her voice caught in the hallway outside his office, asking if the son had come home quietly, over and over, in that soft tone that never once matched what her eyes were doing. Chekhov's rule is simple. If there's a camera on the wall in the first act, somebody's watching the tape by the last one. By that afternoon, Chanel's plan had curdled into something worse than a plan, which was pride with nothing left to protect it. She spent 2 days making comments loud enough for Imani to hear. Some people think a mop is a marriage. Some people are about to be exposed. Their days are numbered. Imani let it slide off her, mostly, until Chanel followed her into the hallway a second time and stood in her way. "You really did it," Chanel said. "You really threw yourself away on the help." "I made a choice," Imani said. "You keep talking like that's a tragedy." For me, it's the first easy decision I've made in this building. He'll never give you what a real man could. He already gives me more than money ever gave you. That one landed. Chanel's face went flat, and she stepped back, and for a second she had nothing. And then she turned it into a laugh and walked off. Because a woman like Chanel would rather laugh than let you see the hit connect. Tasha, watching all of this from the edges, drew closer to the puzzle without ever putting her hand right on it. She'd started greeting Marcus sweetly in the hallways now, in front of people. "Good morning, Marcus." She brought him a pack of snacks once, in front of 2 staffers, and smiled like it came from somewhere warm. Marcus took it and said, "Thank you, ma'am," and knew exactly what it was. It wasn't kindness. It was insurance. Then she tried the other angle. She caught him by the closet one afternoon, voice low and gentle. "You look tired. You work too hard. And I'll tell you something, since nobody else will. Imani doesn't understand your struggle. Not really. Some people use others to make themselves look good. She likes looking humble in front of the room. Maybe you're just the way she does it." She let it sit. "If you ever want a real friend in here, I'm right here." Marcus looked at her a long moment. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, and walked away, and Tasha smiled. Sure, she'd planted a seed. She hadn't planted anything. She'd just shown him the last thing he needed to see. Chanel would look you in the eye while she cut you. Tasha would hold your hand and tell you your own friend was the knife. He walked down the hall thinking, not for the first time, that his mother had been right about which one to fear. But something else was working in Tasha now, underneath the scheming, and it was closer to the truth than she knew. She kept turning it over at her desk. The janitor's calm, the way the chairwoman's eyes found him, the note on Imani's desk, the steadiness of a man who should have broken under Chanel weeks ago and never did. What if he isn't what he looks like? She whispered to her screen one afternoon. And then she shook her head, because it was too big a thought, and she wasn't ready to have believed. A janitor was more than a janitor. Still, she made a note to be kind to him, just in case. That was Tasha's whole religion right there, just in case. Then, on Thursday, a message went out through the building's internal system to 3 people, and to 3 people only. Vivian wanted to see Imani, Chanel, and Tasha at her home. Saturday. Chanel got the message and lit up like a marquee. She read it 4 times. "She's introducing me to her son. Finally. That's what this is," she told Nakia at lunch, barely able to sit still. Saturday. Her house. "She's bringing me to meet him. Imani disgraced herself, so it's down to me and Tasha, and let's be honest, it's down to me." Nakia said, "You sure that's what it is?" And Chanel said, "What else would it be?" and went shopping that same evening. Tasha got the same message and did not light up. She read it once and went very still. Why, all 3 of us? If it were an introduction, it would be 1 name, not 3. If Imani had already taken herself out, why was Imani invited at all? Something was off, and Tasha's whole talent was feeling when something was off. She didn't buy a new dress. She picked out something simple, not too loud, not too plain. Wife material, if that was what Saturday turned out to be. Careful if it wasn't. Imani got the message and felt her stomach drop. She'd expected the chairwoman to be angry, or at least disappointed. After that phone call, instead here was an invitation to the woman's home, along with the 2 women who wanted the very thing she'd refused. She had no idea what she was walking into. She only knew she'd told the truth, and she'd have to stand on it. 3 women, 1 Saturday, 1 who thought she'd already won, 1 who could feel a trap and couldn't see its shape, and 1 who'd walked away from the prize and been called to the house anyway, not knowing that the walking away was the only thing that had ever been asked of her. Saturday came hot and bright. Imani arrived first. The Coleman house sat back off a long drive in Buckhead, behind old oaks, the kind of house that doesn't announce its money, because it doesn't have to. She'd brought a cold bottle of sweet tea from her own kitchen, because her mother had raised her not to walk into anybody's home with empty hands, no matter whose home it was. Renette her at the door and brought her through to a wide, bright sitting room, and Vivian was already there. "Come in, baby. Sit down." Vivian's face gave away nothing. "Don't be nervous." Imani sat, but her heart wasn't listening to "don't be nervous." She was braced for the question, "Why did you choose a janitor over my son?" And she had her answer ready, because it was the only true one she had. Then she heard footsteps in the hall, and she turned, and the question died in her throat. Marcus walked into the room, but not her Marcus. Not the grey uniform, not the cap, not the bucket. He was in a crisp shirt and clean trousers and good shoes, his hair cut close, and he moved into that room the way a man moves through a house that belongs to him, because it did. He looked rich. He looked calm. He looked like the answer to a question she hadn't known to ask. "Marcus," she said, "what's going on?" Vivian's voice was very gentle. "Imani, this is my son." The room tilted. "Your son?" "My only son, Marcus Coleman." He said it himself, watching her face. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I pretended to be a janitor because I wanted to know who could love me when they thought I had nothing. I wanted to see who'd respect me when they were sure I couldn't do a thing for them." He took a breath. "I should have told you sooner. By the time I knew I wanted to, what I felt for you was already real, and I couldn't stand the thought of you thinking any of it was a lie. It wasn't. Every note, every night in that building. None of it was a lie. The only lie was the uniform." Imani's hand had come up to her mouth. "All this time. You loved me when I was the man with the mop," he said. "Do you have any idea what that does to a man in my position? Everybody in my life wants something. You gave me water because I looked tired. You told a room full of people I was worth as much as any of them, and you had no reason to say it except that you believed it. I don't even know what to say. Say you'll still have me. Same man. Better shoes." Vivian was watching her son and the young woman with a stillness that had tears sitting just behind it. "My daughter," she said quietly, "you followed your heart when your heart cost you everything you thought you were giving up. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing." And that was the moment they heard a car in the drive. Chanel came through the front door, the way she came through every door. Perfume first. Then the click of heels. Then Chanel, in a crimson dress that cost more than Marcus paid his cleaning crew in a month. Jewelry catching the afternoon light. "Good afternoon, ma'am." Then she saw Marcus and her face changed. "Wait, what is the janitor doing here?" Nobody answered her. "Ma'am, why is the cleaning man in your sitting room?" She looked him up and down and laughed. "Oh, you borrowed some nice clothes today? You think a pressed shirt takes the mop off you?" She turned to Vivian. "Ma'am, please, tell him to stand up and get out." "I thought you called me here to meet your son." "Stand up," she told Marcus directly. "Some people don't know their level. Yesterday you were dragging a bucket. Today you're sitting like you were invited. Don't embarrass yourself." Marcus didn't move and didn't speak. He let her keep going, because she was doing all the work herself. "Are you trying to impress the chairwoman, so she bumps you up from janitor to driver?" Chanel said, and laughed at her own joke. "Sit up straight for once in your—" The door opened again. Tasha stepped in, said, "Good afternoon, ma'am," and then she saw Marcus, and she stopped mid-word. Her eyes did the whole calculation in about 2 seconds. The clothes. The way he was sitting. Imani in the corner with her hand at her mouth. The chairwoman's stillness. And where Chanel's face had filled up with outrage, Tasha's went the other way, smoothing over, softening, adjusting. "Marcus," Tasha said carefully. "You look different today. You know the janitor, too?" Chanel snapped. "I always knew there was something special about him." Tasha's voice had found its gentle register. "From the first day, I knew he wasn't like the others." "Is that why you warned me not to misread your kindness?" Marcus said. It was the first thing he'd said since Chanel walked in, and it was very quiet. "The day after you defended me in front of the managers, you came and found me by the closet to make sure I understood you didn't mean it." Tasha's mouth opened. "I didn't. That's not. Why is the janitor giving speeches?" Chanel said, but her voice had gone thin. Marcus stood up. "My name is Marcus Coleman," he said. "I'm the only son of Vivian Coleman. I'm the janitor all three of you met in that building." And it was a test. For a second, nobody in the room breathed. "That's not possible," Tasha said. "It's possible. You're the son." Chanel had gone grey under her makeup. "You're the son." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The math was finishing itself on both their faces, and it was the same math, and it was landing very differently. Vivian rose from her chair. When she spoke, her voice was level, and it was worse than shouting. "Chanel, do you remember how you spoke to the cleaning crew in my building?" She let it sit. "Do you remember the coffee? The juice on the floor? Do you remember telling my son that some people are born to carry a bucket?" "Ma'am, I didn't know." "You didn't know what?" "You didn't know he was my son. So it was safe. That's what you're telling me. It was safe to treat him like that because you'd decided he was nobody." Vivian shook her head slowly. "That's the whole confession right there. You didn't insult a janitor by accident. You insulted a man you were sure couldn't cost you anything. That's not a mistake. That's a character." Chanel dropped, down onto her knees on the Coleman sitting room floor, the crimson dress pooling around her. "Marcus, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean any of it. I was stressed. I can change, please. Give me a chance." "You want a chance now," Marcus said. "Now that you know who I am. 3 weeks ago you had a chance every single day. You could have looked at a tired man with a mop and just been decent. That was the whole test. You didn't need to know anything. You just needed a heart." He looked down at her, and there was no cruelty in it, which somehow made it heavier. "You didn't love me. You couldn't have. You never met me. You loved the name and the plane and the idea of people bowing to you in a lobby. Crying now doesn't undo the person you were, when you thought no one important was watching. Tears aren't proof of change. What you do when you think nobody's counting, that's proof." "Please," she said on her knees. "Please." He turned away from her. That was the whole answer, and she knew it. Tasha had been standing very quietly through all of this, and now she cleared her throat and stepped in with her softest voice, because Tasha's instinct in every crisis was to separate herself from the person going down next to her. "Ma'am, I know I'm not perfect, but I was never like Chanel. I never shouted at the staff. I never threw anything. I was always respectful to the workers. I always tried to do the right thing." "You were respectful when the room was watching," Marcus said. "That's not. You remember the day Chanel humiliated me in the hallway? You defended me, loud enough for the managers to hear. Everybody thought you were kind. And then an hour later, when it was just us, you came and told me not to get the wrong idea. That you'd only done it because Chanel was making a scene, not because you thought I was worth anything." He watched her. "You did that more than once, Tasha. Sweet in the hall, cold at the closet, and in between, you were down in Terrence's office asking whether the chairwoman's son had come home quietly." "I was just being careful," Tasha said. "No, you were being clever. There's a difference, and the difference is the whole thing." Vivian's voice cut in now. "Loud pride like Chanel's is ugly, but at least it's honest. It tells you exactly what it is. What you do, Tasha, is worse, because it wears the face of the very thing it isn't. You hid selfishness inside a soft voice and called it humility. You wanted advantage and you dressed it up as grace. She shook her head. Chanel showed me who she was and disgusted me. You tried to keep me from ever seeing who you were. I don't know which is sadder, but I know which one I trust less. Tasha's soft voice, for once, had nothing to say. It had always been her best tool, and it had run out of things to do. Terence had come in quietly during all of this and was standing near the door. Vivian glanced at him. Terence, ma'am, he looked at Tasha. For what it's worth, everything you asked me is on record. The building logs the questions people bring to operations. You came to my office 9 times in 3 weeks. 2 of them were about work. Tasha closed her eyes. Vivian turned away from both of them, from the one on her knees and the one who couldn't lift her head, and she faced Imani, who had said nothing this whole time, whose eyes were wet, not from fear, but because it had all come at her too fast to hold. Don't cry, my daughter, Vivian said. You want to know something? You passed a test you didn't even know you were taking. There was no way to cheat it, because you didn't know it existed. You were just yourself every day. When you thought the man in front of you couldn't do a thing for you. That's the only test that's ever been worth giving. She reached out and took Imani's hand. You loved my son when you thought he had nothing. And you gave up everything the day you thought loving him would cost you. Chanel and Tasha spent 3 weeks fighting over a chair. You're the only one who ever saw the man sitting in it. I didn't do anything special, ma'am, Imani said. You did the hardest thing there is, Vivian said. You stayed the same when nobody important was looking. Do you have any idea how few people can do that? Chanel and Tasha were told they could leave. Chanel got up off the floor, with her mascara ruined and her dignity somewhere back on the drive. And she walked out without another word, because there were no words left that would help her. Tasha followed, quiet as she came, her soft voice packed away in a bag that had finally stopped working. Neither of them looked at Imani on the way out. They couldn't. The following Monday, the whole building knew something was coming, because a company-wide meeting had gone on the calendar over the weekend, and nobody could say who'd called it. By 10 o'clock, the big conference room on the top floor was full. Staff standing along the walls, the gossip running its usual current. Maybe the sun's finally starting. Maybe they're naming a new executive. At 10 sharp, Vivian Coleman walked in, and beside her walked Marcus. Not in grey. In a black suit cut so clean, it looked like it had been poured on him, and on his face the same calm expression the cleaning crew had seen every day for 3 weeks. The same man who'd mopped the lobby. The same man some of them had stepped around like furniture. The room started to murmur, then to whisper, then to go very quiet, as one face after another did the recognizing. Isn't that the janitor? That can't be the janitor. In the back, Chanel sat with her head down and did not raise it once. A few seats over, Tasha stared at the table in front of her. Marcus stepped forward. Most of you know me, he said. Some of you know me as the man who cleaned this floor for the last 3 weeks. I want to tell you why I did that, because it matters. And then I'm going to tell you what's going to change. He looked around the room slowly, letting them sit in it. I came into this company as a janitor because I wanted to see how people in this building treat the people they think can't do anything for them. The cleaners, the interns, the security team, the delivery folks. I wanted to know what this place is really like when the boss isn't in the room, because that's the only version of a company that's true. Nobody moved. I saw kindness, he said. I saw people who greeted me by name every single morning when they had no reason to. And I saw the other thing. I saw people humiliate a man they thought was nobody in hallways, in front of crowds, because they were sure it was free. He let land. It wasn't free. There were cameras in every one of those hallways. There always were. I've watched the footage. So has my mother. The whole room understood at once what he was saying, and you could feel it move through the seats like a cold front. I'm not going to play the tape today, Marcus said. The people who need to think about what's on it already know exactly what's on it. This isn't about publicly shaming anyone. It's about the opposite. From this morning, no worker in this company is invisible. Not one. If the cleaning crew doesn't clean, this building isn't fit to work in by Thursday. If the drivers don't drive, half our meetings fall apart. If the interns and the junior staff don't carry the load nobody sees, whole departments slow to a crawl. Every job in this building holds up every other job. There is no such thing as a person here who's beneath respect, and starting today, we're going to run this place like we believe that. Because I do. He looked around the room. So, here's what changes. The pay for the cleaning crew and the junior staff is being reviewed, effective this week, and I already know which direction it's going. New uniforms. A real break room with real chairs, not the closet some of you have been eating lunch in. And any employee, at any level, who humiliates a coworker over the job they do or the money they make is going to answer for it. I don't care what your title is. I mopped this floor. I know exactly how it feels to be talked to like your furniture. Nobody in my father's company is going to feel that again, if I can help it. The applause started slow, from the back where the junior staff stood, and then it came up through the whole room, and it did not sound like polite applause. It sounded like relief. Imani stood among the staff, not up front, not singled out, watching him. Her eyes were wet again. Not because he was rich. She'd never once needed him to be rich. Because he had all of it now, the whole building, every bit of that power. And he was standing up there using it to lift the exact people everyone else had spent years stepping over. That was the man she'd fallen for by a cleaning closet, when he had nothing but a mop and a steady pair of eyes. He'd just gotten the whole world, and he was still him. After the meeting broke up, something happened that nobody had scheduled. The junior staff didn't leave. The cleaning crew, the interns, 2 of the security guards, the delivery guy who'd been standing by the door, not sure he was even allowed in the room. They stayed, and one by one they came up to Marcus, not to thank the chairwoman's son, but to shake the hand of the man who'd mopped beside them, and never once let on. Mama Joy got to him last. She'd cleaned that building 11 years and buried a husband and raised a grandbaby doing it. And she took both his hands in both of hers and didn't say anything for a second because she couldn't. And then she said, "You did us right, baby." And that was all. And it was more than all the applause put together. Marcus, who'd stood on a stage in London, taking a business degree in front of 500 people, without his voice moving, had to look at the floor for a moment before he could answer her. The changes came fast after that, and they were real, not the kind that get announced and quietly forgotten. The raises hit the next pay cycle. The break room got built out on the 3rd floor with actual chairs and a working refrigerator and a window. And somebody started keeping coffee stocked in it. And the cleaning crew took their lunches in there now instead of eating standing up in a supply closet. New uniforms came, good ones. And the first time a mid-level manager snapped at an intern in a hallway the old way, word got back upstairs by the end of the day, and the manager spent an uncomfortable afternoon learning that the rules had in fact changed, and that the man at the top had personally scrubbed the very floor he was standing on. It only had to happen once. After that, people remembered. A few days later, Imani took Marcus to meet her mother. Mrs. Robinson lived in a small, tidy house in a part of Atlanta a long way from Buckhead, the kind of block where people still sat on their porches in the evening and knew whose kids belonged to whom. She'd raised Imani alone after Imani's father passed, when Imani was still small, on a home health aide's paycheck and a lot of prayer. And she looked at Marcusons the way mothers who've done everything alone look at any man who shows up for their daughter, which is to say, she looked at him hard. "So you're the one my daughter's been smiling about," she said. "Yes, ma'am. She lost her father young. She's had to be strong a long time. Longer than a girl should." She kept her eyes on him. "You take care of that." "I will, ma'am. I promise you that." Mrs. Robinson studied him another moment, and whatever she was looking for, she found some of it, because her shoulders came down half an inch. "You've got a calm about you," she said. "My late husband had that. It's a good thing in a man, long as it's real and not just quiet." She raised her hand and prayed over the both of them right there in her front room, and Marcus, who could have bought her whole block without noticing the dent, bowed his head like a man who understood he was being given something money doesn't touch. When Vivian heard about the visit, she smiled for a long time. "You did well, son. I learned it from you." "No," she said. "You learned something deeper than I taught you. I taught you not to look down on people. You went and found out what it actually feels like to be looked down on. That's a different education. That one you can't unlearn." Back at the company, things moved. Chanel didn't get fired, not right away. Vivian put her into mandatory training on workplace conduct and respect, and made her sit in those sessions week after week while the whole building knew why she was there. The story of the gala on her knees, of the coffee, of the son she'd insulted, ran through that place the way stories do, and the respect Chanel had spent years demanding evaporated, because people no longer saw a future madam when she walked by. They saw the woman who'd humiliated the man she'd been trying to marry. Her thing with Terence came out too, that she'd been circling him for his position, and that finished whatever was left. A few weeks in, she resigned. Nobody asked her to stay. Tasha lasted a little longer, because Tasha always lasted a little longer. That was her particular gift. She still came to work. She still spoke soft. But the softness didn't buy anything anymore, because everyone had watched it switch off and on too many times to trust it. Vivian moved her off anything sensitive. Terence stopped entertaining her careful questions, and Tasha came to understand, too late, that if she'd simply been honest, one plain honest answer at that closet, instead of the performance, a door might have stayed open that her cleverness had quietly closed. Chanel was undone by her pride. Tasha was undone by her pretending. In the end, they walked out the same door, a few weeks apart, and the building barely noticed either one go. And then, on a soft evening a couple of months later, Marcus arranged a small dinner. Imani thought it was just family. Her mother was there, in her good dress. Vivian was there. A few people from the building who'd become real friends. She thought they were just eating together, and she was halfway through telling her mother a story about Mama Joy from the cleaning crew when Marcus stood up, and the table went quiet, and she stopped mid-sentence because she saw his face. "When I met you," he said, "I had a mop in one hand and a bucket at my feet. Most people who looked at me that month saw a poor man. Some of them saw somebody they could order around, somebody they could pour coffee on." He was looking only at her now, and the rest of the table had gone still. "You saw a man. You gave me water because I looked tired. You defended me to a room that had already decided I didn't count. You loved me when you were certain I had nothing. And then, the day you thought loving me would cost you everything, you didn't even hesitate. You picked up a phone and you gave it all away for a man you thought scrubbed floors. He came around the table and got down on one knee, and this time nobody had told him to. I don't ever want to spend a day being loved for the wrong reasons, he said. You're the only person who loved me for the only right one. Will you marry me? Yes, she said, and it barely got all the way out. Yes, I will. He put the ring on her finger and stood and pulled her into him, and across the table, his mother sat, with both hands pressed to her mouth and tears running down and not one word to say. Because for the first time in a very long time, the strongest woman in Atlanta had nothing she needed to fix. They married in the fall. It was a good wedding, warm, not a show, full of people who actually knew them. The cleaning crew invited and seated up front, where anybody could see them, because Marcus had made sure of it. Vivian took Imani's hands before the ceremony. My daughter, she said, I welcome you into this family with my whole heart. You came into it with a good heart already. Don't you ever let anybody in this world talk you out of it. I won't, ma'am. And Imani never did become somebody else. That was the part that would have surprised the two women who'd walked out the Coleman door. She had the name now, and the house, and the plane those women had fought over. And she still came into that building every morning and said, Good morning to Mama Joy by name. Still stopped to help carry a load that was too heavy for one person. Still saw the people the rest of the world had trained itself not to see. Marcus ran the company with a steadiness that made the older executives nervous at first, and then loyal. And the two of them, together, slowly turned that place into somewhere. A person's worth wasn't measured by their paycheck or their title, but by whether they were decent when they thought it was free. Vivian watched the two of them and understood she'd gotten more than she'd gone looking for. She'd set out to find her son a wife. She'd found a daughter with peace in her, which is a rarer thing and worth more. And Marcus carried one lesson the rest of his life. The one his mother taught him with words and the mop taught him for real. You don't find out who a person is by watching how they treat the powerful. Anybody can be sweet to someone who can help them. You find out who they are by watching how they treat the people they're sure can do nothing for them at all. Some people respect a nice suit. They never learn to respect a human being. Some people respect a title and never once respect honest work. His grey uniform never took a thing away from who he was. All it did was show him, plain as a camera on a wall, exactly who everybody else had always been. Chanel saw a janitor and insulted him. Tasha saw an opportunity and tried to wear a face over it. Imani saw a tired man and gave him water. In the end, nobody had to expose anybody. The truth stood up on its own, the way it always eventually does, and the woman with the good heart became family, while the ones who chased the chair went home with nothing in their hands. And a great deal to think about. If this story moved you, take one thing with you. The next time you meet somebody the world has decided is nobody, the mop pusher, the delivery driver, the person cleaning up the mess nobody else will touch, look at them like Imani looked at Marcus. You will never once regret the kindness. And every so often, though not often enough, you'll find out you were standing in front of somebody the whole world was about to have to reckon with. A quick word before you go, because stories like this one point at things that are very real. This has been a work of fiction. The people are invented and the company doesn't exist. But the way workers get treated when nobody powerful is watching is not invented, and neither are the protections that exist for it. In the United States, workplace harassment and discrimination are covered by real law, though the specifics vary from state to state, so this is not legal advice. If you're facing harassment or discrimination at work, you can contact the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission at 1-800-669-4000. If you or someone you love is dealing with domestic violence, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. For financial exploitation or elder fraud, the National Elder Fraud Hotline is 1-833-372-83111. And if you're going through a crisis of any kind and it feels like too much to carry, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is there, any hour, at 988. Real problems have real people who help with them. Reach out to a professional you trust. You're worth more than the worst way anyone ever treated you. And don't let anybody, on a bad day, convince you otherwise.